Around 1,000 years ago, when faith guided across deserts and journeys were made not just with footsteps but with belief, a massive caravan of Muslims set out from Damascus toward Mecca for Hajj, a sacred journey filled with hope, unity, and devotion. Families traveling together, hearts connected to Allah, unaware that their peaceful journey was about to turn into a nightmare. Because as they reached the lands of Palestine, a ruthless tyrant launched a sudden and brutal attack on them. His soldiers storming the caravan without warning, spreading chaos, looting wealth, burning supplies, and turning a moment of worship into a scene of horror. Innocent men were captured and tortured. Families were torn apart, children cried in fear, and even women were not spared from cruelty. The desert echoed with screams and helplessness, and yet, the greatest mistake that tyrant made was one that would change history forever. Because among those captives was the sister of the great Muslim leader Salahuddin Ayyubi, a name that would soon become a symbol of justice, unity, and power. And when a wounded survivor somehow escaped this massacre and made his way back to Damascus, exhausted, broken, but determined, he entered the royal court and delivered the devastating news, describing every scream, every injustice. And as silence fell across the court, all eyes turned toward Salahuddin, a leader known not just for his strength, but for his wisdom, patience, and deep sense of purpose. And instead of reacting with blind anger, instead of rushing into immediate revenge, Salahuddin paused because he understood something greater. He realized that this was not just an isolated attack. It was a sign of a deeper problem, a problem rooted in history and division, and in the loss of something far more important than land, and that was unity. And so before taking action, he chose to understand, to study, and to reflect. And this journey of understanding led him to Jerusalem, a city unlike any other, a city that carried centuries of history, faith, and divine significance. A land where prophets like Ibrahim, Dawood, and Isa, peace be upon them all, once walked. A city that held a sacred place not just in Islam, but in the hearts of millions. And most importantly, a city that became eternal in Islamic history because it was from here that Muhammad was taken on the miraculous night journey, traveling from Mecca to Jerusalem in a single night, leading all the prophets in prayer, and then ascending to the heavens, making this land a symbol of spiritual unity and divine connection. And centuries before this moment, Jerusalem had come under Muslim rule during the time of Umar ibn Khattab, a leader whose name became synonymous with justice and humility. Because when the city surrendered, it did so peacefully, without bloodshed. And Umar entered Jerusalem not as a conqueror filled with pride, but as a servant of justice, dressed simply, walking humbly, and ensuring protection for all its people, regardless of their religion. He cleaned the area of Masjid al-Aqsa with his own hands and restored it as a place of worship, setting an example of leadership that history would never forget. But as time passed, the unity that once made the Muslim world strong began to weaken. Divisions started to grow, leaders fought for power, internal conflicts spread, and slowly the strength began to fade. And this weakness did not go unnoticed. Far away in Europe, a movement began to rise. Fueled by religious motivation and political ambition, armies were gathered, speeches were given, and what followed would become one of the most violent chapters in history. The Crusades, when these armies reached Jerusalem, they did not bring peace, they brought destruction. The city was captured with unimaginable brutality. Thousands of innocent people were slaughtered. Men, women, and children, all killed without mercy. The streets of Jerusalem were filled with blood, and even those who sought refuge in holy places were not spared. It was a moment that shook the world, turning a sacred city into a symbol of tragedy. And while all of this was happening, the Muslim world remained divided. Unable to respond with strength, and to make matters worse, fear spread even deeper with the rise of secret assassins, mysterious figures who targeted leaders and spread, making the situation even more unstable. It seemed as if darkness had completely taken over. But history has a way of changing through those who rise against it. And from this darkness emerged Salahuddin Ayyubi, a leader shaped not just by war, but by knowledge, discipline, and faith. A man who had studied the lives of great leaders before him, who understood that true power did not come from force alone, but from unity and purpose, and instead of rushing into battle, Salahuddin focused on what truly mattered. He began uniting the divided Muslim lands, resolving conflicts, building alliances, and restoring hope among the people. Slowly but surely, he brought together those who had once been enemies, reminding them that their real strength lay in unity, not division. And as this unity grew stronger, so did the possibility of reclaiming what was lost. And when the same tyrant who had attacked the caravan continued his, and even crossed limits by insulting the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, Salahuddin knew that the time for action had come. He made a firm promise. A promise not just of revenge, but of justice. And this promise led to one of the most important battles in history, the Battle of Hattin, where Salahuddin displayed not just bravery, but brilliance. Using strategy and patience to weaken his enemy, he lured the Crusader army into the harsh desert heat, cutting off their access to water, exhausting them before the battle even began. And when the moment came, his army struck with full force, and the result was decisive. The Crusader army was defeated, their king was captured, and the tyrant who had caused so much suffering was brought before Salahuddin. And in a moment that defined his character, Salahuddin fulfilled his promise by delivering justice himself, holding the oppressor accountable for his crimes. And with this victory, the path to Jerusalem was finally open. And as Salahuddin marched toward the city, the world watched, expecting revenge, expecting destruction, expecting history to repeat itself. But what happened next was something no one expected. Jerusalem surrendered, and instead of bloodshed, Salahuddin showed mercy. He allowed civilians to leave safely. He protected the weak, he restored peace to the city, and he proved that true victory is not about revenge, but about justice, compassion, and honor. And this is why, even today, centuries later, the name Salahuddin Ayyubi is remembered not just as a conqueror, but as a symbol of true leadership. A reminder that even in the darkest times, one man with vision, faith, and integrity can change the course of history forever.